Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to the Rustic Vaughan Lodge. So today we're going to be talking about a book you might have heard of. It's a little book called The Shining. So I am reading every book by Stephen King. I had a read every book by challenge. I spun a wheel, came up on Stephen King's name. So I'm reading every book this guy wrote under Stephen King's name. And so I read Carrie, I read Salem's Lot, which were his first two novels that he released under his name, and this is the third, The Shining. This is a pretty good book. So you probably are familiar with this story. You probably have seen the movie The Shining, the Kubrick movie, which is pretty darn good. Basically, it has the same plot as this book does, but this book has some pretty significant differences from the film. And I'll talk about those. So, in The Shining, Jack Torrance, alcoholic Jack Torrance, has had a lot of trouble. He's lost his job as a teacher, and he's pretty close to divorce with his wife, Wendy, who's just had it with him. And he has a son, Danny, and Danny has psychic abilities, which Danny later learns are called The Shining. So Jack Torrance, he used to drink with this rich guy, and this rich guy and him, they both decided to quit drinking at the same time. And this rich guy has arranged for Jack to get a job as a caretaker up at the spooky old Overlook Hotel in Colorado. And so Jack is also a writer. He's trying to finish a play that he's been writing. And so he thinks, hey, this is a great opportunity. I'll go up to this hotel, get my head together, finish this play, earn some money. It'll be great. It'll be great for me. It'll be great for the family. Now, the problem is that this hotel, part of the year, if you're at this hotel as a caretaker, you're going to get snowed in. Because your hotel's only open for a certain season, and during the winter, they close it down because it's going to get snowed in. Now, there's plenty of food at the hotel, there's electricity. Should be just fine, and it would be just fine if it were an ordinary hotel, but the Overlook is no ordinary hotel, oh no. It's haunted, either by ghosts or an accumulation of evil that has become a sentient spirit, the spirit of the Overlook Hotel itself. We don't know. It's kind of it's kind of uncertain what it is, which is good. Add some mystery to the story. But there are definitely either ghosts or an overpowering evil spirit that is the Overlook itself. Maybe both. So they have that going on. So they're basically going to a haunted hotel, which is never a good idea. But you know, this poor family, they don't know that. So Jack and Danny and Wendy, they all drive up to the hotel on the closing day of the hotel to start Jack's caretaking job. Now, while they are at the hotel on closing day, Danny runs across the cook of the Overlook Hotel, a guy named Halloran. Now, Halloran talks to Danny for a little bit, and Danny learns that Halloran also has psychic abilities, and he calls these abilities The Shining. And he talks to Danny about Danny's having these powers and how Danny has to be careful at the hotel because the hotel has, hotel's a little tough on people that have The Shining. Now, Danny previously had bad dreams and bad premonitions about going to the hotel. Danny also has an invisible friend, or more than that, perhaps, Tony, who visits Danny sometimes in his visions. And Tony showed up in Danny's visions and said, man, don't go to that hotel. Bad news up there, man. Don't go, Danny. But like Danny has any choice. He's a little kid, so he has to go along with his parents and just make the best of it and hope for the best. Sometimes everything Danny shows him doesn't happen. So maybe this will be one of those lucky times, who knows? But it's a Stephen King book, so you know things are going to go to hell. And boy, don't they. So one of the interesting things about this book that is different from the film is that Jack Torrance is a much more interesting character in the book. In the movie The Shining, Jack Torrance, who's played by Jack Nicholson, now this guy is a lunatic from the start. I mean, you can tell. I mean, when they're driving up to the Overlook Hotel in the movie, you're like, don't go with this guy. This guy's crazy. He's obviously crazy, and bad things are going to happen. And they do. In the book, it's a lot more nuanced than that. Jack, you learn a lot more about Jack's character. And Jack, he's an alcoholic. You learn a little bit about his history. His father was also an alcoholic. His father was an abusive alcoholic. And Jack doesn't want to grow up to be like his father. He had a complicated relationship with his father because he loved his father, but his father beat his mother and beat him and his brother. So, it's a whole thing. And he just doesn't want to end up like his own father. He wants to be a better man than that. He wants to be a good person. You get that throughout. Now, Jack is kind of a jerk. He is. But he's trying to be better. And you sympathize with him because of that. He has his good points, Jack does. And so you're kind of rooting for him. At least you would be if you don't know exactly what happens to him. Which is the unfortunate part about having watched the movie before you read the book. And everybody knowing the plot of this book. So you kind of know where it's going to go for this poor guy. But I imagine if you didn't know how it was going to end, you'd be rooting for him a lot of the way. And hoping for the best outcome for this poor guy. Of course, it's not the best outcome. So Jack is a really complicated character. Danny is also a pretty complicated character. Danny, who was a child, who's trying to process all this information that's way too adult for him to process. He can sense the spirits and the evil in the Overlook Hotel. So he has to deal with that. He has to deal with his premonitions. He has to deal with his mom and dad. He can psychically understand some of their thoughts, so he knows they're contemplating divorce, which is frightening to him. So he has to deal with all this stuff as just a little kid. Fortunately, he's a pretty tough little kid. So that's one thing in his favor. He's a resourceful little guy. So the characters in this book are really great. Wendy, she's not such a great character, unfortunately. Not a bad character, but there's, not much to her if you compare her to Jack and Danny, unfortunately. She's a little tougher than Wendy in the film. That's about the best you can say, I think. It's hard for me to judge whether this is a better novel than Salem's Lot. I like Salem's Lot an awful lot. It's one of my favorite Stephen King novels, and I really enjoyed reading it this last time. This does have better characters in that one, though. This might be the better book. It might be. I kind of rate them equal. But it might be the better book. It might be a more accomplished work. Stephen King famously was an alcoholic himself, so a lot of the feelings that he had, he puts in this book. A lot of his own experiences he puts in this book, his own feelings he puts in here. And that helps the book an awful lot. It gives it a sense of realism, at least as far as the characters are concerned. You really can relate to these characters. As far as the supernatural aspects of this story, they're pretty well handled for the most part too. I never thought I'd be afraid of a fire extinguisher hose. That doesn't seem like a scary thing, but Stephen King actually makes it kind of scary in this book. He makes a lot of mundane things kind of scary. And he does a really good job with the supernatural elements in this book for the most part. There are a couple things that don't work. There are hedge animals in this book. Out front there's a bunch of hedges that are shaped like animals, like they do in Disneyland and places like that. Now, and there's a scene where Jack's out there or Danny's out there, I think both of them at one point, and they kind of turn away and look back, and the hedge animals have moved a little bit. They're not in the positions that they were before. And every time they turn away, these animals are coming a little bit closer. That was handled really well. And that's an element that's not in the film. But eventually those hedge animals become their own kind of monster thing, and that doesn't work really at all. There are a couple things that don't work, and the hedge animals are one. If they had just left it at that initial scene, it would have been cool, but he pushes it a little far. Stephen King, sometimes this guy pushes things a little far. And he did with the Hedge Animals, actually. And there are a couple of other things, there are a couple things at the end of the book that are just way over the top. A little bit more over the top than they need to be, sometimes comically over the top, unfortunately. But those are quibbles. For the most part, this is a pretty darn good book, and I was pretty impressed with it. I had read this book once before in my life. I was either in my late teens or early 20s. And I remember liking it. I remember feeling that same way about the Hedge Animals, so maybe that's just an element of the story that I just don't think works. But overall, I really liked it. I think I liked it even better now, reading it as an old person. I really liked it. I liked it an awful lot. So this is a very good book, The Shining. High recommendation. The next book I'm going to be reading in this Read Every Book by Challenge will be Night Shift, which is his first collection of short stories, which I remember being pretty darn good. So I'll be reading that in August, followed by The Stand, I believe is the book that came out after that. So far in the 70s, Stephen King is great. I think he was good through most of the 80s as well. From what I remember, things do kind of go downhill here and there the further on you go with Stephen King. But we'll see. I'm going to go into them with an open mind this time, reading them as an old person, like I say. So I'm having a good time doing this challenge so far. I'm enjoying it. I might not be enjoying it so much when I get to the mid-2000s, early 2000s Stephen King work. I might be cursing my life by that time, but we'll see. Like I said, maybe that stuff's better than I remember it being. I know he wrote some pretty good books later on in his career as well, so we'll see. I'm going to judge them as I go through them. So yeah, this was great. Be sure to catch me tomorrow. I should be back at the stately Vaughan Manor. So I guess the only thing left is to talk to little Stephen King over here about his work. You know, during this challenge, I always talk to little Stephen King about his books. So, little Stephen King, pretty good job you did here on The Shining. Those Hedge Animals, though, they didn't work so well. A little over the top a couple times, little Stephen King, but that's okay. Overall, this is a pretty good book, little guy. Yeah, good work on The Shining, little one. And I'll see you next time for Night Shift. Put little Stephen King aside. And tomorrow, like I said, catch me back here or catch me at the stately Vaughan Manor. I will be doing, barring accident or incident, I should be doing my plans for August. It'll be exciting fun. So, I'll catch you next time. Hopefully in a building that isn't 110 degrees. Okay, guys, thank you.